I want to thank everyone for coming to join us tonight on our latest policy Google Hangout. I know it's been a little bit, it's been an exciting time, a lot of great stuff happening. You've probably been if you follow us on Facebook and Twitter, you've seen a lot of the things we've been up to and working on. We always want to hear what you're doing, what we can support, what people need help with. We're really about making this great work go forward. I'm actually really excited tonight. You won't be hearing primarily for me, but I have some very special guests on the line with us, folks and colleagues from CDC who are going to chat with you, answer some of your questions, give you a layout of what CDC can do and how we can all work together to truly end this epidemic. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Mr. Lamont Scales. Lamont.
Well, good evening. We would like to thank you all for having us on this Hangout. I think it's a great opportunity for us to kind of share a little bit about who we are at CDC, what we do, how we can connect you all to some of our activities so that we can better engage. We're going to share some opportunities for internships and fellowships, and also talk about PrEP, which is the new hot topic, and a way that we can really engage gay and bisexual men. So I'm going to turn it over to our division director, Dr. Eugene McCrae, who is going to talk a little bit about who we are, what we do at CDC, to kind of put things in perspective.
Good. Okay. Hi. So I'm the probably old man in the room, and we'll probably give the most boring talk here, but I really, just to set the stage, I'm the director of the CDC's Division of HIV/AIDS Prevention, or DHAP, as I will refer to it throughout the talk. But tonight I want to really take the opportunity to speak with you as we too share in your commitment to engaging young black gay men and other men who have sex with men, or MSM, from around the country in the fight against HIV. So we're going to have three speakers here tonight. So I'll be speaking first, and we'll provide a general overview of DHAP, the history, function, and organization, and then I'll talk a little bit about the status of the HIV epidemic in the United States, and then touch on some of our current programs and priorities. And this will only take about 10 minutes. And then following my presentation will be Lamont, who you just heard from. He's the coordinator for our gay, bisexual, and other MSM activities. And then he's going to discuss training and partnership opportunities. And then he'll be followed by Dr. Don Smith, who's a medical officer here in the division, who will give some background on pre-exposure prophylaxis, or PrEP, and lead a discussion on how you may engage in CIS with PrEP implementation. So, and then, of course, we'll be happy to then answer any questions that you have at the end of the presentation, including some of those we received in advance that, that may not have been addressed during the presentations. So let me start by just giving you a brief overview of the division, historically speaking. The program that would eventually become DHAP led the early investigations that identified the first case of AIDS in 1981. And since these early years, our organization has really grown from a small, committed group of pioneering researchers to a multidisciplinary, diverse workforce of over 700 staff operating in about 10 operational units or branches. Our efforts are really guided by the National HIV/AIDS Strategy that was released in 2010, and the division's strategic plan that serves as a roadmap for addressing the three primary national priorities or goals. And those goals are, number one, to decrease incidence of HIV, increase access to care and improving health outcomes for people living with HIV, and to reduce HIV-related health disparities. And CDC also has a unique role of monitoring the epidemic and the nation's progress against the goals that are laid out in the national strategy, as well as other indicators. And to that end, we publish routine reports that are detailing where we are doing well and where we need to improve. And I'll mention some of those later. But examples of the reports that you may be interested in and you can find on our website that we'll share with you are the 2013 National HIV Prevention Progress Report and the 2014 State HIV Prevention Progress Report, some work that we're very proud of. So with the strong foundation and expansion of our division over the years, we rely on the leaders and branches within the division to meet the charge and challenge of really of our ever-changing epidemic. And we do this by concentrating our efforts in 4 key areas. Are we on the slides okay? No. Okay, but one of our largest areas of is our prevention programs, such as our flagship funding opportunity announcements, our cooperative agreements with health departments and community-based organizations, which is led by one of my senior staff, a woman named Janet Cleveland, that some of you may have met. The other large area is our national surveillance systems and surveys that we use to track and monitor HIV, as well as risk behaviors and utilization of healthcare and prevention services, led by Dr. Amy Lansky. And then our biomedical, behavioral, operational, and implementation research, which is helped us to develop new HIV intervention strategies and improve existing interventions and program. And then finally, we do a lot in terms of communication campaigns and partnerships to raise awareness and ensure that all people know the facts about HIV and how to protect themselves and their partners from becoming infected. So just as our organization has grown, our budget has increased over time to meet our new and emerging demands. So generally speaking, the DHAP expenditures have increased around 60% in nearly 2 decades, from about 416 millions in the mid-1990s to about 655 million in 2013. So therefore it's important though to note that HIV prevention funding, which includes CDC domestic effort, represent really only a small fraction of the overall federal dollars for HIV. And so therefore it's critical that we make really every federal prevention
Hey, hey everybody, it's Matthew. We are trying to get them back. They have seemed to have lost audio on their side. We are working real hard to get that fixed. Thanks for bearing with us. While we wait for the folks from the CDC to get back, I can just give you a couple updates that are probably of interest to folks on the call from a federal policy perspective. Probably most importantly, that open enrollment is about to start again. So folks who missed out the first time will be able to uh, get a chance to come in again and still get a chance to enroll if people are still interested. Secondarily, the White House just had probably their first, or at least first in a long time, meeting of gay and bisexual men in the HIV epidemic in recognition of Gay Men's HIV Awareness Day. It brought in stakeholders from around the country to talk about what can be done to, in the next basically 26 months, which is the time between this and the next administration taking over. What can we do and what can this administration do to really help us make a big impact in terms of the resources and dollars that we still have? So those two updates have happened. It's been really interesting to see kind of where the White House goes with that. They took a lot of information that folks had, took people's ideas, and really wanted to make sure that they are able to meet the responses and needs of people in the community. And I think we've got the CDC folks back, so I will kick it to them.
How was that? Go back. Yeah. One more. You can go back one more. Sure. I apologize for the disconnect. But let me. I was at the point where we were beginning to talk about our budget. But the point that I wanted to make from this slide was that the majority of our funding goes out. Is extramural. That means it goes out to support our prevention programs, and so we really keep very little internally for use internally. So of the funds that go outside, implementing prevention program and surveillance program makes up nearly 90% of the resources, the 73 plus 14% that you see on the slide, of our directly funded activities, with health departments and community-based organizations representing our largest investments. This slide shows that prevention programs for MSM account for more than 40%, followed by heterosexuals at 34%, and then IDUs and other at about 11%. This chart doesn't include a breakdown of all funding programs, therefore it's a partial representation of all the entire extramural budget that we have. So I'll give more details about some of our targeted effort for MSM in a later slide. So let me just basically turn to a few slides about the epidemic itself. And as you know, approximately 1.1 million people are estimated to be living with HIV. That's shown in the red on the slide. And this represents an increase of about 60% in the past 15 years, 60%. However, new HIV infections shown in the yellow on the bottom line really has stubbornly persist at about 50,000 per year. So, the next slide just shows that African Americans continue to bear the disproportionate burden of HIV compared to other population. And even though African Americans comprise only 13% of the U.S. population, they represent the largest percentage of HIV diagnoses in the U.S. at 46%, compared to whites at 28% and Hispanic Latino at about 22%. And HIV continues to disproportionately affect gay and bisexual men, with more than half of our new HIV infection occurring in this group. And men who have sex with men, or MSM, represent approximately 2% of the U.S. population, but accounts for about 63% of all new infections and more than half of people living with HIV. Recent studies have really shown that most of our new HIV infections are occurring in youth, which is about 70%, occur in gay and bisexual men ages 13 to 24, and occur mostly among African American men, something that I'm sure many of you are aware of. In addition to reducing HIV incidence, we most um, well, we need to work on harder to improve outcomes along the HIV continuum of care among those people with HIV in these same groups. So based on our 2013 National HIV Prevention Report that I mentioned earlier, this slide shows information within the report, progress at a glance regarding the targets or indicators for reducing health disparities among population groups. It tells us that among racial and ethnic groups, African Americans are the least likely to be in ongoing care or to have their virus under control or suppressed. Study shows that 37% of black MSM achieve viral suppression versus Hispanics at 42% and whites at 43%. And 26% of young MSM achieve viral suppression versus 42% overall, so that's really not good. And these data clearly shows the urgent need to expand access to proven HIV prevention programs for gay and bisexual men and to develop new approaches to fight HIV. So if we are to achieve these goals of the national strategy, we really need to accelerate things, and we need to have even sustaining efforts at federal, state, and local level, which will be critical, and particularly in communities of color where HIV continues to remain stable or increase. So what are the vision's priorities and programs and priorities? So to respond to the harsh realities, CDC's approach to HIV prevention has really had to evolve considerably over the last several years as the evidence base has expanded and new tools have become available. So for much of the epidemic, CDC focused primarily on behaviors change as the linchpin of our HIV prevention program, reflecting evidence base as it existed at the time. But more recently, we've also learned a lot about implementing HIV prevention, for example, about which interventions are most scalable or about the critical importance of treatment adherence in improving health while reducing infection. So some of you have heard about our CDC's high impact prevention approach. And what that is really about is putting available tools and knowledge to work in a way that advances the greatest, that achieve the greatest impact. And so high impact prevention isn't just the framework for CDC's own work, it's also an approach that can increase the combined impact for all of us, including health departments, community-based organizations, and health providers. So all of us have to play a part there. So we're all dealing with constrained resources, and we all need ways to deliver big on the promise of the recent advances that have come about. So as most of you know, we've actually taken important steps to advance high impact prevention at the national, state, and community level, including focusing health departments and community-based organizations funding on those prevention strategies that we believe will have the greatest impact. These include intensifying HIV testing, prioritizing linkage to and retention in care for people living with HIV and AIDS, and promoting PrEP and other approaches for high-risk negative individuals. So I want to just give you a few general ideas that are influencing the development of my priorities by now that will be announced later, and let me just sort of briefly say what they are. First, I think we need to further clarify and strengthen our approaches for young MSM, and especially young black MSM, given the alarming trends in new infection in this population. Secondly, I think we need to achieve the full promise of PrEP, which will require us to expand uptake and address practical implementation issues. By maximizing the impact of this available prevention strategy, we could significantly reduce new HIV infection in this country and in some special populations. So lastly, we must continue to monitor program impact through the effective use of surveillance data so that we all have the information we need to track our progress against these goals and shift courses when we need to. And I think so. I'm getting close to my last two slides, but first, let me just. I'd like to highlight sort of a few of the activities in our prevention portfolio for gay, bisexual, and other men who have sex with men that are currently underway. And you can go to our website at www.cdc/msmhealth/msm program, and we'll get this to you later if you want to know more about these programs. First, I want to highlight the program that we're implementing that's targeting, that includes a $55 million 5-year investment that was launched in 2001 to support community-led HIV prevention in in 2011. Really meant to support community-led HIV prevention for young gay men and transgender youth of color. A second initiative is the MSM Testing Initiative, which is a $14 million three-year effort to scale up HIV testing, identify HIV-infected gay men previously unaware of their infection, and link them to HIV medical care, particularly among those who are disproportionately affected, like African-American gay men. And finally, we are supporting some community grantees to implement only those evidence-based interventions that are the most effective and cost-effective, with the majority of these newly prioritized evidence-based intervention targeting MSM and those living with HIV. And also, again, you can go to our website to get an updated list of the approved evidence-based interventions at www.effectiveinterventions.org. We're also communicating critical HIV prevention messages for Black gay men through campaigns and partnerships. And an example including one of our communication initiatives called Testing Makes Us Stronger campaign, which is aimed at encouraging testing among Black gay men, primarily those 18 to 24. And we also have working partnerships to mobilize the community through expansion of the Act Against AIDS Leadership Initiative to include national Black gay men organizations. So in closing, HIV continues to have a heavy toll on gay and bisexual men across our nation, especially young Black gay men. And we cannot afford to lose a new generation to this entirely preventable and controllable infection. So each of us, whether at the federal, local level, whether advocates or partners, or just individuals who care passionately about our communities, each of us can play a key role in reducing the number of new infections in this country and eliminating disparities. So I know that many of you on this chat today are in position to help us in this fight, as you have connections to the communities across America. And with your help, I think we can even do more. So I want to thank you for listening to me and for being here and for your commitment to HIV prevention. And I'd like to welcome Lamont Scales now to say things about our work.
Thank you, Dr. McCray, and thanks for kind of setting the stage for providing some background for who we are at CDC and some of the activities that we are providing for gay and bisexual men. So what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about some of our internship opportunities. Here at CDC, we believe it's very important to build and develop the future public health workforce. So I'm going to share some of our internship and fellowship opportunities with you. I invite you all to go to our website as I'm talking so that you can see some of the things that I'm going to go through. And the URL is www.cdc.gov/fellowship. So that's www.cdc.gov/fellowship. And when you get to that site, you'll be able to see all of the different internship and fellowship opportunities that I'm going to share with you. All right, so next slide. So the first area would be our student internship and fellowships. And under that, there are 6 different categories. I'm not going to go through all of them because we'll be here all evening. So I'm just going to highlight a few where I think that you may be interested. So if you go and look at the general public health area, you will be able to see a couple different opportunities. And one I wanted to highlight, which was the James A. Ferguson Emerging Infectious Disease Fellowship Program. And that's a 9-week program for students in any year of their graduate studies interested in public health, infectious disease research, and clinical opportunities. You'll also be able to see the education requirements. And there, that's master's or postdoctoral students that will be there. Next, I think is a really great opportunity if you would look at the minority health area. There's the project Imhotep, which is a summer research internship. And that's an 11-week training program for juniors, seniors, and recent graduates interested in minority health, biostatistics, epidemiology, occupational safety and health, or health sciences. And those are for undergraduate students or recent graduates. So I think many of you may fit into that category. So I would encourage you to go look online, look at the requirements, and if you have questions about applying, you can do that. Next slide. So next, I want to share our postdoctoral research fellowship opportunities, and we have 3 areas where you may find some interest. For those of you who like statistics, the first category is health statistics research. And if you look, there is a National Center for Health Statistics postdoctoral research program. And that's a 2-year appointment with potential for extension to conduct research in areas of mutual interest, including statistical theory, survey methodology, and statistical computing. Well, another one I wanted to highlight was our EIS program, and that's our Epidemic Intelligence Service program. And that is a 2-year postgraduate training program of service and on-the-job learning for health professionals interested in the practice of applied epidemiology. And that has been around for a mighty long time. That's since like 1951. Next slide. But for some of those of you who are interested in management, I want to share our career and training fellowship opportunities. And as you can see, there are a lot of different categories. But again, if those are interested in management and leadership, I want to share our Presidential Management Fellowship at CDC opportunity. And that's a 2-year training program in public health leadership and management for recent college graduates. And you can also apply for this while you're in your graduate program. The other one I want to highlight is another public health management, and that's called the Public Health Associate Program. And it's a 2-year fellowship for those interested in frontline public health service. And that requires you just to have a bachelor's degree. So I invite all of you to take a look at these different opportunities that we have. And again, at CDC, we're really encouraged by young individuals who are interested in public health, and we would like to enhance your skills. If you have questions, my contact information is on the next slide. I can help you get in contact with someone who can provide more information about those different internship or fellowship opportunities. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Dawn Smith, who is going to share some information about PrEP and how you both can get engaged with partnering with some of your individuals who you work with discussing PrEP.
Hello, everybody. We had a little kerfuffle with the microphones. Can they hear me? Okay. All right. So as you heard from Dr. McCrae, they're going to be increasingly work to try to implement PrEP, one of our new important ways of preventing HIV infection. And so tonight I want to talk with you a little bit about what I think PrEP has to do with the lives of young black gay men and with your organization in particular. So the first thing, this is sort of an overview of what I'm going to cover in the next 15 minutes or so. I'm going to talk about why we think we need this prevention tool for young black gay men. We're going to talk a little bit about what we know about the awareness and acceptability of PrEP in your group. We want to talk a little bit about the basics of what PrEP requires and what we believe strongly PrEP can offer to young black gay men. and then some challenges for PrEP use by young black gay men, and next steps that we would like your help to engage with. So on this slide, we're looking at the number of new infections in MSM in 2010 by both race, ethnicity, and age group. And what you will see is that there were more infections. There were four out of all the new infections in 2010. There were 4,800 infections that occurred in black gay men between the ages of 13 and 24. And there were more infections in this group than in any other subgroup within our surveillance system. Next slide. And this looks at incidence, new infections in young MSM, only those who were 13 to 24 over the last several years. And what you can see is that there has been a steady increase among black young MSM, with a 22% increase in new infections between 2008 and 2010. Next slide. It's important to look not just
Hey folks, this is an important lesson of why we should all contribute to the government and help them upgrade systems so they can actually talk to us on our terms and our playing field. So give us a quick moment. We will work to get the CDC folks back. I know Dawn was having some great discussions about why it's important to look at where the incidence data is going and telling us. Obviously, this is very it's not that new to a lot of us. We've seen in our communities, we know our friends, our brothers, our neighbors, the people we meet in the clubs are part of this and being affected. And so we're trying to figure out what are our new options for preventing within the context of the lives of black gay men. So what do we have to do to make them have options, be available to those options, and have those options really come to scale to make an impact in their lives? I'm going to pause for a quick second while I check to see if we hear anything from my CDC friends in my chat function. So, I don't know, make yourself some interesting music. Think about how Scandal is coming on tonight, and followed by How to Get Away with Murder. Hold, please. Check. So we're not getting sound. Can you guys hear us? Can you hear me? Don? Do you? Anybody? Okay, give us a couple more minutes. What I will tell you in terms of updates on a scientific side, while we wait to see if we can fix what is keeping our CDC colleagues' computers frozen. For those who haven't heard, both the PROUD study out of the UK, which was a study looking at PrEP in high-risk individuals, enrolling 500 men to see if doing half the arm was deferred, so half of them were going to start PrEP in 6 months, half were going to start PrEP immediately. The UK released some data and made an announcement just a couple weeks, last week, that they would allow for folks to. Oh, do we have Don back? Nope. Lost. That would allow for everyone in the study to go immediately on to PrEP rather than having anyone wait. Which is exciting news because it means that individuals were willing to take PrEP and that PrEP was effective for them. And it's just a matter of now them running on their data. They have some other endpoints and things they're looking at in that particular study, but it is another adding to the growing body of literature that's saying pre-exposure prophylaxis is working. Looks like the CDC folks are back, but they're still muted. I don't know if they can hear me. Don, can you hear me? I cannot hear you. The other study is called YBGLI. It was a study that started primarily out in France, but is in several other countries, looking at, as they called it, PrEP on demand. It is a dosing strategy that is looking more towards an event-based taking of your dosage, and it has a very interesting chart. There's some good cartoons. Oh, I think we got them back.
Hi.
Hey, Don.
Hi, good.
I was just talking about YBGLI and Proud while we waited for you to come back.
I know we were listening. We could hear you, but I couldn't hear you. Couldn't hear me. Okay, so do you have the slides up or not?
I do not, but if you
Okay.
guys email them to me, I can throw them up on my screen.
Okay, I mean, we can send you the slides later. Let me just try to talk you through. So what was I talking about when you cut out?
We had the slide of the clinics in New York and the clinics in LA, or not LA, Atlanta.
In Atlanta, okay. So what I was saying in Atlanta was that, again, they found that there were very, very high rates of infection among young black MSM. Among those who were 18 to 24, the rate of new infections was 12 for every 100 person years. And what that led to was when they were screening to find participants, they were doing HIV testing. And so they also looked at the prevalence of HIV infection in people walking around in the community. And for black MSM, by the time they reached age 30 to 30, 60% of the men that they approached for testing were HIV infected. And that's the result of the accumulation of this high rate of infection at younger ages. So we feel that it's very important for young Black MSM to be fully informed about PrEP and to be considering how they can access it in their communities. There haven't been very many studies that looked at PrEP awareness and stability in young Black MSM. But studies in general have found that there is a range of awareness among gay men to a quarter of them. There have been only 2 studies that assessed acceptability of PrEP for African American MSM, and those were both theoretical. So suppose it works this well, would you be interested in taking it? In focus groups that we did in Atlanta in 2009, many of the young men were very interested in using PrEP. And the reasons they expressed for their interest was, one, it would provide them an opportunity to get regular HIV testing, and also they had a sense that they did need more protection from HIV and that this might be helpful to them. The things they were worried about were side effects, how's it going to get paid for, and whether it would interfere with their motivation to use condoms. Last year, there was an online survey of 13 to 39-year-olds in southern states, and they asked them would they be interested in using different preventive interventions given a certain amount of effectiveness. It was interesting that an equivalently high number were interested in using PrEP or condoms if either one were 100% effective. Fewer were interested in using either PrEP or condoms if it was only 75% effective. Next slide. Oh, okay. So let's just, in case there are people who aren't totally on board about what PrEP involves, I wanted to just briefly review the basics. So CDC recently published guidelines for the use of PrEP in the United States, in which we said it was indicated as a prevention option for people who are at substantial risk for HIV infection because they had recurring potential HIV exposures, either because of inconsistent or non-use of condoms, or more specifically, if they were choosing sexual partners in a community that had a high prevalence of HIV infection, so that every time you choose a new partner, the likelihood that that partner is infected is fairly high, meaning that you could be exposed to HIV. PrEP requires medical care because it requires the prescription of a medication, and therefore you need to both initially and then periodically while on PrEP have various kinds of clinical testing every 3 to 6 months. Part of that is testing for HIV to be sure that you're HIV negative. Part of that is testing to see how your kidneys are responding to one of the medications that's involved, but also looking at whether you have an STI that needs to be treated and some issues related to hepatitis B. If all those things are in order, then PrEP involves taking a daily dose, 1 pill, of an antiretroviral medication called Truvada. People in trials who had high adherence to daily dosing had very high levels of protection, greater than 90% reductions in their risk of acquiring HIV infection. People who were not able to take their doses daily and had inconsistent or periodic dosing had very low levels of protection, and in some studies had no protection. The other thing about PrEP is to know that we're not talking about PrEP instead of condoms, that actually you get the greatest protection if you're able to take your pills daily and you're able to use condoms consistently. Next slide. So in thinking about what are the risks, you heard from one of the studies that some of the young men were concerned about side effects. However, in all the studies that have been done to date, most men have no side effects. The ones, about 5% have some side effect. Most commonly, that's either a stomach upset or a headache that lasts for somewhere between 2 and 6 weeks and then goes away, what's called a startup syndrome. As your body gets used to the medication, the side effects go away. In people who have HIV infection who take these drugs as part of their treatment regimen, every now and then there's been a problem with renal function. But that's not been seen in people without HIV infection who take these medications. But we're still being cautious and watching for it in case it should occur. Similarly, with bone health, in people who take these drugs as part of their HIV treatment, there have been significant decreases in the hardness of bones, what's called bone density. In people who don't have HIV infection, those decreases have been very mild and have not resulted in any increased fractures or other health effects. The last concern that people had, which is how would this affect their condom use and their other sexual risk behavior. In the trials, we've seen risk behavior come down for everybody in the trials, whether they were taking the drugs or not taking the drugs. But as this moves out into the community, it'll be very important to pay attention and see if this is something that occurs. So why do we think PrEP is something that young black gay men would benefit from? First of all, for HIV prevention, it does provide an opportunity to get regular HIV testing. It's required every 3 months while you're on this medication. Secondly, it will reduce the risk of acquiring HIV infection if you take your medication. And so we also recommend that clinicians provide support for medication adherence as well as support for reducing other behaviors that may be causing exposure to HIV. But because it's part of a medical care system, we think that there are some other benefits that young gay men would get from being in PrEP care. First of all, you'll be screened for hepatitis B, and if you're not vaccinated, that would be part of your care. It would be an opportunity to get vaccinated against HPV. It requires regular STI testing and treatment, so that becomes a part of regular care. We think that particularly will help young men get in the habit of going for regular medical care and of talking with their providers about sexual behaviors and about their sexual health needs, as well as providing access to primary health care. As you know, many young people in our community have problems with hypertension, have problems with diabetes. This is another way to get regular access to medical care. Next slide. So what are the challenges that are there for PrEP use by young MSM? The first one is medication adherence. Young age is associated with lower ability to take medication regularly, both in PrEP studies and also in other health conditions. We know this about young people taking asthma medications or other kinds of daily medications. The second issue has to do with the cost of clinical care. Young men have lower rates of health insurance, especially in states that don't have Medicaid expansion. This can be a real problem in accessing any kind of medical care, including PrEP. We know that many young MSM don't feel comfortable talking to healthcare providers about their male-male sexual behaviors, and yet one needs to be able to do this if you want to say to a provider, I really think I need PrEP. And secondly, we need to do more work with providers, particularly primary care providers, so that they know how to give appropriate health care to meet the sexual health needs of young gay men. For example, we know that this population has high rates of STIs, but many primary care providers don't really understand about the need for testing for rectal or oral STIs or how to go about doing that. So let's talk about adherence just briefly with some numbers. So there are 2 studies that have included young black MSM in some number. One is the trial that originally proved efficacy called IPREX. They have an open label study, which means when they proved efficacy, they offered the drug to everybody, including those who previously had received a placebo pill. And when they looked at them, drug was detected at very high levels. So at 2 months into that open label study, 90% of them had drug detected in their blood, showing that they were taking it as prescribed. And when they looked at every blood sample they had throughout the 2 years of follow-up, 2/3 of them had drug in every single sample over those 2 years. But then look at the small study that was done with young black gay men in Chicago. These were young men who were between the ages of 18 and 24. And at 1 month into the study, only 63% had drug in their blood. And by the time they made it out to 6 months in the study, only 20% had drug in their blood. So we know that this is going to be a special challenge for young black MSM. In terms of the drug costs, we've been pleasantly surprised that in fact PrEP is covered by most insurance, both private insurance that you get through your employer or through your school, and also by public insurers. For example, most Medicaid programs do in fact cover PrEP. And the drug company that makes the medication has a special medication assistance program for PrEP, so that those who have low income and no insurance coverage, Gilead will provide the medication to a provider to give to those patients. And if you have insurance but it has a high copay, they also have a copay assistance card. So many of the concerns about cost are because people are not aware that these resources are available to help them. The last thing I want to talk a little bit about is what CDC is doing to try to make PrEP, to try to understand how better to deliver PrEP. We've been working with our foundation, the CDC Foundation, to fund 4 clinics in the United States. These are in community health centers. And they're going to be engaging people and providing PrEP to them as a clinical service. So you don't have to agree to be in research. You go there and you get the PrEP because it's clinically indicated for you. And then we'll be evaluating from their medical records how things are going. In association with that, we're also going to do something called the Context Matters study, which is to try to do some interviews with people in the community, with providers, to understand how they're thinking about this new PrEP service in their communities. Next slide. We wanted to be sure that these clinics are accessible to the communities that are having high rates of HIV incidence. The next 4 maps I'm going to show you are census maps, where each dot, you can't see each individual dot, but each dot represents a person, and the color is coded by race. So wherever you see green, that's where black people are living within that city. And wherever you see a dot, that's where the black dot is where our clinics are located. So you can see in Chicago, for example, the clinic is located on the south side of Chicago, which has a very large concentration of new infections among African Americans. And similarly in Houston, we're on Martin Luther King Boulevard, which, as we all know, is a good indicator of where the black folks are. If you look at the next 2, we're in Newark. The Newark clinic is very near the airport, in an area that has both large numbers of African American and Hispanic persons. And then in Philadelphia, we're in an area called Strawberry Mansion, which again is a very underserved African American community. The last thing I wanted to show you is that one of the things that we're trying to do at CDC is develop materials that we think will help people to access PrEP where they are. So we have a brochure, which is online. So if you go to your doctor and your doctor doesn't know what PrEP is, this is a brochure you can take along with you. And it has resources both for patients and for providers to get more information about PrEP. This can be downloaded at the website you see there. In addition, we funded a toll-free national clinicians instruction line called the PrEP line, where any doctor can call and get told what you need to do to deliver PrEP safely and effectively. Okay, so the last slide is about what we would like for this initiative to do in helping to get the word out about PrEP. So the first thing is to increase awareness by disseminating materials to your networks, both those developed by CDC and those developed by others, and to help increase the dialogue in the community about what PrEP might do to be helpful to reduce new HIV infections. Obviously, to work at developing partnerships with health departments, with CBOs, with other kinds of organizations to try to facilitate the rollout and scale up of PrEP, and partnering with organizations that are developing materials that are specially focused on PrEP for African American communities. And last, of course, to advocate, which is what you do best. So advocate with health departments, with policymakers, to both educate them about the HIV situation among young Black gay men and what role we think PrEP should play in that, and how they can change policy and other factors to make sure that we expand access to PrEP. So that's the conclusion of my talk. I'm going to give you Lamont back.
Thank you so much, Dawn. So I'm going to change our settings so that all of us you can see all of us sitting here, and we're going to actually respond to some Q&As, some questions that were sent in earlier in just a second.
See if there's any questions.
So we are going to, so I can see, Matthew, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes?
Yes. You see the
All right, so we're going to actually go to some of your first questions that you had. Do you want to read your question to us?
Yeah, I will read their questions. The first question we got in is, do you have to have an MPH in epidemiology to be part of the EIS program?
I can answer that. Yeah, the EIS program is a very competitive program, and most of the successful applicant has at minimum an MPH, but in truth, the majority have PhDs or MDs or other terminal degrees.
Okay, excellent. Next question. What kind of evaluation determines if a community organization continues to get funding from the CDC?
So we're looking at a number of things when we talk about continuing funding for a community-based organization for FOA. We're looking at their ability to engage the target population. We're looking at their ability to conduct what the required activities of the FOA outline. We're also looking to see the sustainability of the organization to continue to conduct all the activities that are outlined in the FOA. What CDC also does, you may be familiar, you may not be, is that we have a capacity building branch that works directly with funded community-based organizations and non-funded community-based organizations to get them to the ability where they can apply for funding and be sustainable. So I invite you all to look at our capacity building website if you're a community-based organization who may be looking for some of those resources.
And let me just also add that we do also have a number of what we call CBA, or capacity building assistance partners that are out there that are also available to help both funded and non-funded community-based organization and other organizations to help with capacity building, training and grant writing, etc. So there are a number of opportunities out there for training and capacity building.
Excellent. Next question is, how do we reach the under 18 MSN population that may or may not be out to their parents?
We need you to help us answer that question. That's a big challenge, and we realize how important it is. One of the challenges we have is, especially if they're in school, right now we don't have a lot of a strong collaboration with the Department of Education and many of our local education entities to help us with school-based health education. I don't know if you had anything.
I'll add to that. We're also conducting research to see how we can reach these populations. We know, as Dr. McCray says, it's very challenging to reach young Black gay youth who are not out to their parents. We do collaborate, however, with the Division of Adolescent and School Health, and some of their activities that they do. One is creating safe environments. So we know that anti-bullying is a big thing for the federal government and for a lot of local schools and agencies. So by creating safe environments, we know that that also helps young Black gay men when it comes to homophobia and discrimination.
This question is for Dr. Smith. Do you believe that the lack of representation of Black male primary care physicians affects YBMSM getting care? And I'm going to broaden that to Black physicians because I don't think they necessarily need to be male, but whatever.
I think there's two things. This has been a long-standing problem in the Black community, and I think most of us have gotten care both from Black physicians and from white physicians because, frankly, there aren't that many Black physicians out there, and they're doing all kinds of things. So, if I want to find a Black OBGYN, but many of them have gone into pediatrics or surgery or general internal medicine, there's even fewer available to do that. And so I think the same thing is going to be true for young Black MSM. I think the key is to make sure that primary care physicians who are going to be tending to the sexual health of young men have the cultural competence to care for young Black MSM.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to be able to insist that it has to be a Black physician or it has to be a male physician. I think what we have to find is a cadre of physicians who know what they're doing and who are prepared to provide appropriate care to young Black MSM.
Excellent. That was a great answer. Someone asked, when will we know the long-term side effects of Truvada as PrEP?
It depends on what you mean by long-term. For example, with respect to renal function, in one of the trials, the IDU trial, there were people on this drug for as long as 6 years, and they didn't have any problem with their renal function. So again, from when you prove efficacy of a new drug or a new drug treatment, you generally have 3 to 5 years of data, and you don't get
Looks like you guys froze again. Again, people, pay your taxes. The CDC wants to talk to you, but the technology will not let it happen. I will attempt to try to get them back. And while you're paying your taxes, make sure you vote. That is also critically important. The government can only do so much, but it has to respond to the needs of the people. So we all have to go out there and do our civic duty and vote. They can't say that because they're government workers. I can say that as a private citizen. So go make sure this election you make your voice heard, and then you make sure politicians follow up on the promises they make to your community. Don't let these people skate. All right, they're going to try to log back in, but we'll try to have them answer a couple more questions if we can get them back. Until then, I'll see what I can do for answering questions that have come in online. So I'm going to ask, will PrEP have a generic drug in the future? That is a good question. The answer is yes and no, but yes. We know that all drugs eventually go to generic. We know that the drug that we are using for PrEP right now, Truvada, does have a date in which it goes generic and which its components go generic. When that is going to happen will depend on a number of things, a lot of FDA rulings, and how things go down the drug pipeline. However, we should also roll in and remind people that Truvada is just the first drug in this kind of PrEP category. The idea of PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, is an idea, and we might get other drugs and other candidates, both in terms of micropicides, in terms of pill forms, film. It looks like we're CDC back.
So, I think we're back, Matthew.
Yep.
Many apologies. We are trying to get this together. I promise you.
I told people, pay those taxes so the CDC can upgrade to talk to us.
Oh, thanks. What other questions did you all have?
We have still, will young black MSM have access to social workers as well as clinicians and physicians when they start PrEP? So I think they're trying to see, we know about this social piece, this kind of social piece that goes along. And I know, before I let y'all answer, I know that the HIV Prevention Trials Network has a trial, 073, that is looking at black MSM and PrEP. And one of the hallmark pieces of that trial is looking at a client-centered care coordination model that looks at what other services and referrals do we need to build around supporting people's behavior. So you can Google that. I think that's presenting some ideas of how you might support people in their behavior. I'll let the CDC answer. They have some weird beeping going on there. I think it looks like a drill. Not a scary drill because they're still on screen. Waiting to see if they can unmute. Can I force them to? Yep, they seem to be caught in a drill. You see these conditions that these folks work under to talk to us? I think if you're at home, you should give them a round of applause for coming and hanging out.
Good. Keep going. Don, can you hear us?
Did you hear the answer to the question?
I did not, but I heard. Okay. I saw it.
Okay. What I was saying is that if you go to a larger medical center or a large medical practice, they will frequently have those kinds of support services. So they will have somebody who specializes in working out insurance issues, or they will have somebody who specializes in behavioral medicine who can do counseling and referral for substance abuse treatment. They will probably have nurses who are specialized in adherence counseling. If you go to a private doctor's office, you probably won't find that. You'll find a doctor and a nurse and a receptionist and not a lot else. So, you know, it very much will depend. I think in studies, we have the luxury of funding to hire specific kinds of people that we think would be useful and seeing how that works. But that doesn't usually get translated into direct care in the community as rapidly as we would like. Hello?
Hello? Matthew, did you have other questions?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have one last question from the Twitterverse so far. Young BSM and challenging or hard to reach seem to go hand in hand on most of these calls. Why? How do we change this?
So I think that's one of the things that we're trying to conduct research on. One of the things we have our MSM testing initiative, which is looking at how do we reach gay men, particularly Black and Latino, including young Black gay and bisexual men, to get into testing and link those that test positive into medical care. So we're trying to learn which strategies are most effective. We are conducting that particular demonstration project or research project in about 12 different cities. So we're hoping that we're going to learn from that and get more information.
Yeah. The other thing I would add, although we're not able to do a lot yet, but I'm hoping that we'll be able to do much more in the future, is use social media as a way of trying to reach out and get access to young Black and Latino gay men who have sexual men and bisexual men, and use social media as a way of really getting messages out, as well as learning, directing, or encouraging people to access certain sites that are, young gay men friendly sites that can help, or places that can help them. We're also beginning to have dialogue with a number of partners, including health departments and our colleagues at Health and Resource Services Administration, as well as some of the other partners at Department of Labor, et cetera, to talk about how we can have these wraparound programs in certain communities. Because one of the things that we're learning is that there are mental health services available in many of these communities. There are housing services potentially available, but the appropriate linkages are not there. So how do we develop those linkages and sustain them and make sure that our patients, our young gay Black men who are either HIV positive or not HIV positive, but at high risk, can get access to those services as they need them, these wraparound services, to help them stay, healthy and uninfected.
Excellent.
And then I'll also add that we have our 111113 our 111113 grant that provides direct services for young Black and bisexual men, and that includes younger. So we fund probably about 36 different community-based organizations to work with this specific population. And if you're familiar with the empowerment model, that it has an advisory board where it has to consist of young Black gay men so that they can talk about what does the program look like, who the target audience will be reached. And a lot of CBOs have used that opportunity to build youth-centered work to engage young Black and gay bisexual men.
Awesome. I'm just doing a quick look through to see if there's anything substantive we missed from the ones that came before, but I think you all answered everything. So I would just end with, if you have any final thoughts you want to leave with the group, go for it.
Well, one of the things that I would encourage you all, as a piece that I talked about as far as building the capacity of young Black gay men who are interested in working in public health, is to take full advantage of, one, if you're working at a community-based organization, to take advantage of our capacity building assistance. It is not frowned upon when you reach out to ask for assistance from CDC to improve your organization. That's one. Two is take full advantage of the fellowship and internship opportunities. We are always trying to ensure that gay and bisexual men and women of color are engaged in this work. So I can't highlight or echo that enough, of ensuring that you apply for some of these opportunities. And then finally, I'll just say that CDC is committed to working with Black and gay and bisexual men to ensure that they are engaged in some of the work that we're doing, that they're at the table, ensuring that they're having their voices heard so that we can do the best job that we do. A lot of you have been doing some of this work for a long time. You're well versed on who we are and what we do, which is why we want to partner with you and ensure that we hear your voice so that we're doing the right things.
And this is Dr. McCray again. I just wanted to emphasize what Lamont just said, that we certainly are committed to addressing HIV in young Black gay men, and it's a really important part of what I am interested in doing, and we're committed to moving forward. And I want to, it's been great for me just to be here, but I want to ensure you that we'd like to continue this dialogue and establish a relationship with you so that we can learn together and also have opportunities to share information with you and answer important questions that you may have that we can answer. And some things we won't be able to answer, and we'll just have to sort of have a dialogue about them together, and hopefully together we will develop at least something that will help us get the answer that we need. So I really enjoyed this opportunity, and I think Dawn wants to just also offer her say a few words.
I just want to say one thing in parting that's sort of specific to PrEP, and that is I would encourage you to get more active with the organizations that are supporting PrEP, that are sharing information about PrEP, because right now they're almost exclusively not inclusive of Black and young MSM. My concern is PrEP is highly effective, and we already have significant disparities. And if we get into a situation where white gay men are accessing PrEP and reducing their rate of infection, and Black gay men are not in the conversation and are not accessing PrEP, then we are going to end up with even worse disparities than we have now. And I think you guys are key to making sure then that doesn't happen. And some of that is talking with CDC, but some of that is being sure that you are strong voices on the listservs, on the advocacy groups that are out there promoting PrEP, so that you have the most current information and that your voice is heard during all of those conversations.
All right, thanks, Don. I want to thank you all so much. I know that we will continue the conversation. I know that I chat with at least two of you fairly frequently, so I look forward to the work that's going forward and those who are able to join us. And I hope everyone has a good night. With that, I bid you adieu and enjoy your Shonda evening. Bye all.
No, while it was down.